Hello, humans. My name is Nadia. I am a digitally generated avatar speaking to you on behalf of the Cyber Distortion podcast. Kevin and Jason wanted me to let you know that they are very happy you decided to join us for this continued discussion on the topic of artificial intelligence and its impact in the world of cybersecurity. If you missed our first episode on AI, episode 3, we highly recommend you go back and watch that first. Today, we continue our conversation with special guest Justin Hutchins, an expert in this area. So please, sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 4.
Episode 4, AI and ChatGPT is Scary Shit, Part 2.
Well, we're back, and it's already been an exciting discussion around AI. And, I think let's dive in it one step further. We started talking a little bit deep on some ChatGPT and things to that effect, but I want to get you guys' feedback on this. So, in a recent article, Checkpoint Research and others noted that ChatGPT was capable of writing phishing emails and malware, especially when combined with OpenAI codecs. So, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman wrote that advancing software could pose, for example, a huge cybersecurity risk, and also continued to predict we could get to real AGI, artificial general intelligence, in the next decade. So we have to take the risk of that extremely seriously. Altman argued that while ChatGPT is obviously not close to AGI today, one should trust the exponential growth of that. And the flat looking forwards as well as vertically looking forwards. So when you think about its possibilities and you think about what the CEO is saying about it getting to this AGI level, can you help define for our listeners that, what this would really mean?
Absolutely. So I think the best way to understand AGI or artificial general intelligence is by contrasting it to artificial specific intelligence, which is essentially what we currently today just refer to as artificial intelligence. So artificial specific intelligence is that we've got very proficient artificial intelligence capabilities right now, but every single one of them is designed with a very specific learning objective. They are created to do a specific thing. ChatGPT is created to do language processing. Boston Dynamics focuses on motor skills and physical interactions with the real world. So you've got all these different systems, but every single one requires a deliberate focus on what it is trying to achieve. The idea of artificial general intelligence is that we would no longer need to specify that focus of the artificial intelligence, but instead that it would be able to decide for itself what it wants to learn, and it would be able to interact with the world the same way that we do in just making decisions about how it would operate. Personally, I think that artificial general intelligence, as scary as AI is, I think that concept is even more terrifying because it really is empowering the system in a way that there's even less control than everything else that we've talked about before. But I think the question of how close are we to AGI, or another question that is very common in the industry, is artificial general intelligence even possible, gets down to a lot of very philosophical roots. There's the question of mind-body dualism versus materialism. So the idea of, do you believe that everything that happens in the world is purely physical phenomenon, that our brains are just the inevitable physical consequence of electrical signals that are taking place? Or do you believe that the mind or consciousness is something completely non-physical, something like a soul? So if you lean more towards that mind-body dualism perspective, you're probably of the mindset that we will never achieve artificial general intelligence, because you would never be able to replicate that non-physical capability of will and consciousness. For me, I think that it is possible, and I think we will see it. I think that we're still a ways out from doing that. But I think a more pressing question, at least for me, is whether or not artificial general intelligence will become completely irrelevant because of the idea of the singularity. So Ray Kurzweil is kind of the author of that concept, which is basically we will hit a point in the near future where artificial intelligence is developing so rapidly that the only way that we as humans with our limited biology can keep up with that is to integrate that capability and that technology into our own biology.
Oh man,
and we're already seeing the early stages of this with a good buddy of mine, Lynn No, is a big advocate of the transhumanism movement and is kind of on the fringe edge right now of that, but he has like 6 or 7 implants that can do all kinds of different technological things. He gets into his office by a wave of his hand.
Wow.
So, and then you also see companies like Elon Musk's Neuralink, which is researching this concept of basically putting an implant in our brain that allows us to interface with technology directly by our thoughts. So for me, I think more likely than getting to a point where systems are operating in a general intelligence sense, I think what's much more likely to happen, and probably the safer of the two options, is that we will still ourselves be the operators of will and the deciding factor of what takes place, and instead we'll just integrate those capabilities into our own abilities.
Wow.
So again, a very, very philosophical topic. It's a lot to unpack there, and a really hard question to answer too.
Man, it really is. I mean, you're starting to get into, the religious aspects of AI and things like that. You know, where do morals come into play, and where does your what you believe spiritually come into play in these things too? Because if you start to depend on the technology to help you make decisions based on nothing but common sense data, then you're not really using those emotions and those feelings that truly drive a lot of the decisions we make in our life. And I think that's what we're really kind of talking about here, right? I mean, I've heard it termed strong AI, full AI, we're calling it artificial general intelligence. Even Elon Musk calls it something different. He called it digital super intelligence. But really, at the end of the day, what we're talking about is computerized intelligence with the ability to continue learning to the point that it feels like a human, and it can empathize with human emotions and the way humans have those emotions drive decisions that they make. And it can even, in some cases, love the way a human loves, right? I mean, is that kind of what we're talking about?
That's terrifying. Yeah.
I
mean,
I've seen articles just this week where someone using AI had convinced the AI intelligence that they were talking to, they were having a conversation. The AI started to fall in love with the person, the human end of the conversation. And by the end of the article, which was quite long, he was trying to convince the AI that it didn't love him because the AI was not human and it couldn't have those types of emotions. And the AI was arguing with him about the fact that it was in love with him. I'm like, man, this is kind of taking a right turn that I did not expect when I started reading this article. And it was creepy, man.
Well, I think that's interesting too, is that the line can be very blurry. Like, how do we know once we've hit that point? Because there's people that, I mean, we recently saw about 6 months ago, Google fired one of their AI ethicists who basically did some whistleblowing and released some documentation claiming that their AI is now sentient.
Oh, wow.
And so for somebody that it's not just a random non-technical person on the street, but somebody who is proficient in technology, who is an established, knowledgeable AI ethicist, to already have that perception, whether right or wrong, shows you that even us being able to understand once we hit that point is going to be a very blurry line and hard to discern once we've gotten there.
Yeah, that's because that's how humans operate, right? Humans blur the lines all the time.
Constantly.
They'll blur the lines. Yeah, I mean, the lines will always get blurred to help us make sense of something that we don't understand.
Or you see people blur the lines ethically and in business all the time. Yeah.
Right. I mean, but it does you boil itself down to exactly how Hutch was describing it earlier, is that, right, as technologists, coming up, understanding how logic really works, and how in our everyday life, witnessing logic happening outside of our control, right? If you go through life, you can see logical expressions constantly evolving and happening throughout the day that you have no control over, right? That's just how life works. But, when you see that and you apply to that some of these same concepts of, so could AI advance itself to the point in which even the emotions that it is replicating or not replicating be as identical as a real human's emotions? That's where it becomes philosophical, because people will, it does fall under the understanding of, how do I perceive my emotions? As Hutch was just saying, do I perceive my emotions as something that is coming from something, someplace else? Or do I perceive my emotions as something that I am totally in control over? They're just some electrical signals that start firing in a certain way, and I start feeling this, and that's it, right? It's something
chemicals and electrical signals.
In my body. Yeah, right. And yes, it's probably all of those things, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's all of those things, not the exclusion of one of those things. It's all of those things to make up what we truly feel as a human. But could an AI system truly get to that point again, right?
Well, Hutch said something interesting earlier.
They're going to try.
He said something interesting earlier about a friend of his that's in this and that has all the embedded technology. It reminded me of what we saw, Jason, at DEF CON last year.
Yeah,
and the meta.
I thought of that.
I think
too.
It was the medical.
Oh, doing implants.
Village.
They'll do implants for you. Yep.
Yeah. We had a guy. We were in line with a guy to go to one of the social events, and he was telling us about the chip he had implanted that day earlier in I think it was the medical village is where they do it, but
they're pretty gnarly. It's a big needle, big gauge needle, and they plunge this thing into you. But
the chip
and
was
he's
so
going
tiny.
Off saying, "Hey."
That chip was
he was
tiny.
Going off saying, "Hey, this will be so awesome, dude! Now I'm just going to use this to unlock my car door, to get into my office."
Yeah.
Right? He's just using this thing and getting up to and opening it.
Yeah, he had one guy there. Wasn't he trying to scan it with one of the flipper devices to see if he could hack his freaking chip? I'm like, dude, I don't know if I'd be going there with that thing so soon.
Oh yeah, so Lynn, the guy that I mentioned earlier, he's actually got Faraday cage gloves that he specially designed to prevent his own implants from being hacked by other people.
Dude, so I would be too.
It's fascinating.
I'd be wearing a freaking metal suit to these if I was going to DEF CON, man.
But I think right now we're only seeing kind of integration of traditional technologies. I think we are going to hit a point where machine learning is integrated,
right,
in that same form. And
well,
as scary as that is, I think still probably less scary than machines being able to operate completely autonomously in a general intelligence sense.
Machines are eventually taking over on us, fellas. What can we do? We're in an arms race. I think, trying to tie how do we tie this back to cybersecurity? I mean, what can we do if we know this technology is coming at a pace that we can't slow down, and we know what it's already capable of? I mean, Hutch, you've been playing around with this stuff for over a decade. You've seen it advance astronomically in that 10 years or so. Where's this going? And what can we do about it if we're just tying it back to cybersecurity? Is there anything we can do?
I think there is. I think that it is. Unfortunately, it's not going to be a one size fits all solution. From a cybersecurity perspective, it really is going to be a discussion that needs to take place as far as the risks and the cost benefit analysis, because there are tremendous benefits to a lot of this technology as well, and it will drastically accelerate the execution of operations by your workforce. But then there are also tremendous risks as well. And I think you were spot on when you referred to it as an arms race, because that's exactly what we're looking at. And we're not even looking at it just from, so of course there's the capitalist arms race of you've got your big tech companies like Microsoft and Google that are competing for that control of the future source of information. But you're also seeing nation states that are already heavily investing in this capability as well. And one of the fascinating things that I found out at DEF CON was after I did my AI talk there, somebody kind of pulled me off to the side, and yeah, he didn't tell me exactly who he was with, but he did mention that it was a 3-letter agency and that he wanted me to sign an NDA to tell me all the details. But he did give me enough about what was going on and it was something that I had never considered, but that even as we speak, we are currently doing essentially counter AI operations. We have awareness of what data sets different nation states are operating against when they're building their models and finding ways to poison those data sets in order to generate a predictable response that will drive the actions of another nation. Wow. And the fact that we're going to that level of manipulation in order to effectually change the ultimate decision that they make is absolutely fascinating, but it also adds such a high level of complexity to political warfare.
Yeah, we hit on that data poisoning in our AI intro, didn't we, Jason?
Yep.
Yeah, you talked about this a little bit earlier about how AI could be used to automate phishing campaigns, and we talked about how marketing to people can be used, it can be used to market people in certain ways. Think about just the last couple of election cycles we had, and we had nation states manipulating, communities of people. And you get to the point where you start to think about, it's not far-fetched to really draw the lines between nation states creating dialogues, using AI to create dialogues that are ever evolving and changing and trying to move populations of people towards a certain sentiment to manipulate the outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, we're already there, I think. We're already there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy stuff, man. Really crazy stuff. So let's talk a little bit about some of the really crazy stuff that you've seen and maybe have done, Hutch, with AI. And, without getting too far off topic, you did a talk at, like you just said, DEF CON 29 on
30.
voice-assisted technologies.
30. Last year.
Oh, was it 30?
Yeah, it was last year.
Well, the voice
no.
assistants actually was 29. AI talk
29.
Oh, that one.
30.
Yeah, that one. Okay.
Yeah. And we met with you after that talk, and we went through some more details on it. It was really interesting. But, you uncovered some interesting things that are hooked and tied to these devices. And we talked a little bit about it a few minutes ago. But can you speak to some of the lessons learned during a fairly recent penetration test of a large-scale Alexa for Business implementation in a hospital environment where voice assistants were implemented to assist with patient interactions and during the peak COVID-19 pandemics?
Yep, absolutely. So this was a fascinating project and definitely one of my favorites that I've done in my entire career. So during COVID-19, of course, there was very early on, there was a significant PPE shortage, personal protective gear or personal protective equipment. And hospitals were trying to scramble to figure out how they could compensate for that. And one of the things that emerged as far as a technological solution for this was that rather than having patients just push the nondescript nurse call button, nurses would then have to come in, find out what the patient needs, likely go out to get what the patient needs, and then come back in, where you've now got contaminated PPE and you've had to take it on, put it off multiple times through that process. So a company decided to create an Alexa skill called Ava. And this was originally picked up by the large Los Angeles well-known healthcare firm Cedars-Sinai, and multiple other hospitals followed suit. But the idea was deploy Alexa in the patient rooms, and then people can ask Alexa, tell my nurse I need medicine. Alexa, tell my nurse I need ice chips. So rather than having a nondescript, I just need my nurse, you could give Alexa information about what specifically you need. And the nurse, before even coming into your room, knows what she needs to gather in order to respond to that. So you can imagine, with the emphasis on saving PPE, how much traction this got in the early pandemic stages. So we got the opportunity to come in to a hospital that was deploying this new capability. And we're testing from the perspective of a patient who has unattended access to their room with the Alexa device in it. And the question was, what can we do to wreak havoc? And what we realized was that there were kind of a series of vulnerabilities that existed that would allow us to not only take over the device within less than a minute, but also completely reprogram all of those different skills that interacted with the nurse capability. And so the way that we did this was, one, we realized that in the Alexa for Business stack, if you use, and that's AWS's solution for managing Alexa at a large scale, setup mode by default is enabled, which means that any person can come up there and just take over the device, management of the device with their cell phone if they have the Alexa app installed. And as we know, people tend to leave the defaults enabled.
Oh yeah.
It's not uncommon to see that to be a major security problem. So that was the first problem, was we were able to take over the device instantly. What we also noticed is that if we put our Alexa account that we have on our mobile device into developer mode, then we can instantaneously deploy any of the custom skills that we created in our environment to that device.
Wow.
And then what we also noticed was, based on the way that Alexa skills are created, you can, even just by looking at the regular voice interactions, you can understand and kind of reverse engineer how the skill is designed by understanding the four major parts of any kind of conversation with Alexa, which is the wake word, so Alexa, and then the action word, tell, then the invocation name, which specifies what skill it's going to work with. So Alexa, tell my nurse. So my nurse in this case would be the invocation name. And then the intent utterance, which specifies what function to execute in the back end. I need ice chips. So by just looking at how patients were supposed to interact with Alexa, we were able to determine how those skills were designed and then just recreate our own functionality in those skills. So ultimately what we were able to do is come into a room with less than a minute of access with those pre-programmed malicious skills. We were able to flash the device, deploy our evil skills onto the Ava device. And we did a couple proof of concepts. One was just kind of a trolling thing where if they asked the Alexa device, tell my nurse I'm in pain, Alexa would reply with basically just verbally harassing the patient, saying,
"Get over it,
pain.
Suck it up, Nancy.
Suck it up, get on with it.
You don't know what pain is. I live my life in a plastic encasement and have to listen to."
That's awesome.
So, and then the other one, which was even more potentially impactful, is if they asked the Alexa device, Alexa, tell my nurse I need medicine, Alexa would then reply with, in order to get you medicine, I need to confirm your identity. Please provide your name and social security number. And then we were able to actually exfiltrate that data out to a system that we controlled whenever they responded to it. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. Definitely kind of shows the potential risk of, if these communication and conversational systems are not implemented with the right level of security, there can be significant impacts to that.
Yeah, so everybody listening, just know that someone like Hutch could come into your house with his phone and take over your Alexa world and wreck your life. Oh, man.
Yeah. So I was reading an article, Hutch, on how you were able to bypass CAPTCHA, and a little nifty workaround you uncovered. It seems that you were able to automate a few steps and bypass the visual clicking of specific images by leveraging the visually impaired features of CAPTCHA. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yep, absolutely. So this was reCAPTCHA version 2, which is Google's latest puzzle-based implementation of CAPTCHA, where you have to solve a puzzle in order to prove that you're human. And of course, there's the option of identifying where are the bicycles or where are the traffic lights. But for people who are visually impaired, there is an alternative option, which you can click down at the bottom, which allows you to solve an audio challenge. And so the visual challenge, there are ways with artificial intelligence you can bypass that as well, using computer vision and other capabilities. But you have to use a lot of learning data and solve a lot of those problems up front and then feed it to the intelligence system in order to actually get that to work. A much more simpler solution that we found was if we use that audio challenge and we just write some code that records the audio whenever it plays it. And then the irony is we fed it back to a Google API that does speech to text. And so we're using Google API against Google's reCAPTCHA in order to solve the solutions. But it would provide us fairly close enough in 90% of the cases. text that was equal to what the audio had provided, and we would just relay that back to the captcha, and consistently were able to solve it using Google's own technology against them.
So when you do this kind of stuff,
Wow.
do you reach out to Google and say, "Hey, look, I've discovered a bug in the system," and does companies like Google typically pay dearly for those exploits, and so they can patch them, right?
So in this case, no. Google, I think, has started to realize that trying to evaluate the level of bot activity as a binary yes or no, there is a problem or there isn't a problem, is not realistic, because there are so many parts of our interactions with the internet now that are automated in some kind of capability. You've got plugins in your browser. You may have proxies that are manipulating that traffic. So what they've done with reCAPTCHA 3 is that they've moved away from that solving problems concept altogether, and instead it just evaluates all of the data of your interactions with the browser and then gives you a range of confidence as to how likely it is that you are a robot or you are not.
Wow.
And so because they had already, a lot of companies and a lot of websites are still using reCAPTCHA 2, but since they're trying to move everybody to reCAPTCHA 3 and not doing that binary evaluation anymore anyways, their perspective is, we're trying to move away from that. We realize that there are challenges with it.
Yeah,
that makes sense. All right. Well, hey, we've continued to paint a pretty bleak picture to the listeners, both in episode 1 of AI and again today on episode 2. And as you can see, this technology is advancing at a pace that's very scary, and in general, just the technology in itself is terrifying. But I'd like to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to do something different, guys. We're going to come back in and we're going to talk about how you can use AI for good. So we'll shift gears, we'll take a quick break, we'll come back, and let's actually end this episode on a positive note. What do you say?
Sounds great.
All right, we'll do that.
Hi, I'm Oliver. I'm 8 years old, and I'm terrified for my future. Artificial intelligence has made significant advancements in recent years, with the potential to revolutionize many industries. AI-powered weapons can be programmed to make decisions and take actions without human intervention, which raises ethical and safety concerns. Some experts have warned that the development of AI could pose an existential threat to humanity. If AI surpasses human intelligence, it could potentially lead to the extinction of the human race. As we continue to develop and implement AI technology, we must take steps to ensure that it is used in a responsible and ethical manner. As you think about the speed in which these types of technologies take over our world, I also ask that you think of me. After all, I am the future too.
All right, welcome back. We thought it would be really nice, since we painted a pretty bleak picture of how AI is being used today, to lighten the mood a little bit and end this thing on a positive note. So we're going to talk about some of the things that people are doing with AI that are positive. And this is all information that I got out of a Forbes article recently. And we'll link that in the description of this video so that you can read the full article if you'd like. But I'm just going to start. There's about 10 of these, and the first one on here is cancer screening. So today we're using artificial intelligence powered by deep learning algorithms, and that's in use in healthcare, obviously. Specifically, AI's imaging capabilities are promising for cancer identification and screening, including breast cancer. So a very interesting use of this technology for early detection on cancer screenings. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I could see that. So how about save the bees? Did you know that the World Bee Project is using artificial intelligence to save the bees, Kevin? The global bee population is in decline, and that's bad news for the planet and our food supply. So in partnership with Oracle, the World Bee Project hopes to learn how to help bees survive, thrive by gathering data through the Internet of Things and other sensors, microphones, and cameras on their hives. And the data is then uploaded to the cloud and analyzed by artificial intelligence to identify patterns or trends that could direct early interventions to help bees survive.
Nice. Good
Pretty
job,
cool.
Oracle.
Yeah.
Another one is climate change. So we can make tremendous progress in solving one of the world's biggest issues with the support of artificial intelligence. Climate change is a huge problem, and several thought leaders in AI and machine learning believe technology might be able to tackle it. Machine learning can improve climate informatics. Machine learning algorithms powered by 30 climate models used by the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. Artificial intelligence can also help educate and predict the impacts of climate change on different regions.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, another one is wildlife conservation. AI is being put to work in the planet in its conservation efforts and allows unfunded conservationists an opportunity to analyze data inexpensively. A team from the University of Hawaii's Kauai Endangered Seabird Recovery Project used AI to analyze 600 hours of audio to detect the number of collisions between birds and power lines.
Wow. That's a lot of listening.
Yeah, right.
So how about combating world hunger? Man, that's a big one, right? One of the most viable tools in the fight to end the world hunger crisis is artificial intelligence. It can analyze millions of data points to help determine the perfect crop, develop seeds, maximize current output, and control herbicide applications precisely. Many applications are in use already, but one we'll highlight here is the nutrition early warning system that uses machine learning and big data to identify regions that are at increased risk of food shortages due to crop failure and rising food prices and drought. That's cool.
Yeah, interesting use.
The future of the smart farms.
Yeah, right.
Another one is reducing inequality and poverty. So one of the common objections to AI algorithms is that they can introduce human bias and skew algorithms or trained data sets. But depending on how it's used, as is often the case with AI, it can also be used to help combat this problem. The Center for Data Science and Public Policy at the University of Chicago projects Aquitas, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but and IBM's IA Fairness 360 are both open source toolkits that can be used to track and correct bias.
Very cool. Yeah, we spoke about that in our intro too. The biases that you can impact via AI. Pretty interesting. Okay, how do I harness my Donald Trump voice for this next one here?
You are fake news.
Fake news. Okay, it's true. AI is the engine that pushes fake news out to the masses. We talked about that with the elections and what nation states might be using it for. But Google, Microsoft, and Microsoft are making grassroots efforts on fake news challenges and are using AI to assess the truth of articles automatically. So due to the trillions of posts we see in social media, they need to monitor the impossibility of manually doing this using AI. I guess what they're saying here is, because this is worded funny, but it's impossible to do this manually. So they're using AI to do that, to monitor those trillions of posts. Company also uses artificial intelligence to find words and patterns that could indicate fake news. I'd love to know what those words and patterns are. Other tools they rely on AI are for, and we've heard of most of these, Spike, Snopes, Hoaxy, and more. So some of these websites are used to determine if something is true or not, if you don't know and you just want to go look it up. I use Snopes a lot for things like that.
Wow, that's pretty good. So how about this one? Assess medical images. So in general, artificial intelligence is leveraged in many ways to improve healthcare systems. German-based Siemens Healthineers is a leading medical technology company that integrates AI into many of its innovative technologies. One of these technologies is the AI Rad Companion 4. A radiologist assist assistant that supports routine reading of measurement tasks on medical imaging. AI augments the review of medical imaging to help alleviate some of the workarounds for overtaxed radiologists. And in fact, I read an article a year ago, I think, on how AI was used in ways like this in medical labs to do blood sampling and take readings on blood samples, because I mean it's all data at the end of the day. All they have to do is run the tests and then pull the samples and store the data and then analyze it. And so they were trying to use AI to do that work. So cool stuff.
Yeah, you have to imagine companies like 23andMe are using that, right?
Yeah,
to some degree.
Yeah, that's a scary acquisition of a subset of data right there that
I
I'm
know,
somewhat
right?
reluctant to provide.
Yeah.
So another one, we obviously cybersecurity is a buzz about critical infrastructure, and one of the big challenges there is prioritizing upgrades within critical infrastructure and prioritizing the use of limited resources. So at the USC Center for Artificial Intelligence and Society, AI is deployed to figure out how to maintain Los Angeles's water supply in the event of an earthquake. Since the city's utility infrastructure is aging, the project's aim is to identify strategic areas for improvement in the network of pipes so that critical infrastructure is prioritized for upgrades to earthquake-resistant pipes. So this is a problem AI is adept at solving by simulating many different scenarios that they may have limited data on because those scenarios haven't happened frequently in the real world.
Wow. Yeah.
Interesting.
Another one that's interesting, and actually I allude to this in my talk that I presented previously, is the unusual use of artificial intelligence for grief management. The idea that you can take as a learning sample the text communications that you had with a lost loved one, and that can be used in order to simulate future interactions with them. And I think this is somewhat of a weird one, because I obviously I'm not a grief psychologist. To me, it seems like an odd way to manage grief, but at the same time, each person has to manage that differently. And it is a fascinating use of artificial intelligence, the idea that you could use it in order to simulate interactions with somebody that has already passed on.
Wow.
Yeah, that one's deep. That one's really deep. But again, some people might consider that a good use of AI, especially if they just can't seem to get beyond the loss of a loved one. I can see where it might be construed as both ways.
Yeah, sure. Wow, man. I mean, there's so much we just unpacked in this piece. And, we started off talking a lot about the complexities of AI, where it's going, why it's scary, the malicious, things that could evolve out of it. We even went as deep as getting into some of the philosophical concepts of, can AI actually come close to being human, either physically and or mentally, or both, right? So, and then we kind of came back around again and said, hey, look, AI, even though there's a lot of bad things, AI could do a lot of good as well, and listed out so many things that currently are being used, that AI is being used for. And I would imagine, as we said here, AI can be used for good and bad, and there will be even more good things on the horizon that will come out of AI, especially even in our field, the ability to analyze, understand intent for messaging that's coming across, and determine if it's a cyber event starting to happen, and being able to thwart that before it does happen, as well as I'm sure the bad guys are going to come up with a lot of unique things to keep us busy using AI. So
no doubt.
So it's definitely coming, so.
Yeah. Well, I think you're definitely right about that, Jason, for sure. This is only beginning to move, and it's going to, I mean, just looking back on Hutch's experience in AI and this kind of technology, and some of the things he's been able to do, both from a hacker perspective and just, from some of the things you've talked about, this technology doing now and where it's going in the future. I can't wait to see the next few years of how this is going to unfold. And I can assure you, Hutch, that any discussion you're going to be doing at DEF CON or Black Hat or any of these places where I happen to be, I will be front and center, ready to hear that discussion, because you're doing some really cool stuff. And I just can't wait to see what you're doing with it in 3 years and where it's gone from a worldwide perspective in 3 years. So with that, I think since we can end on a good note here, I'd like to just let you take this opportunity, Hutch, if there's any last words of wisdom maybe that you'd like to impart on the listeners and say around AI or ChatGPT or anything else in this world. The floor is yours, sir.
I think, first of all, thank you guys for having me on. You guys produce fantastic content, and I'm really excited to be a part of that. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
In addition to that, as far as words of wisdom, I think probably my parting notes would be things are going to get really weird in the coming years.
Oh, yeah.
But it definitely won't be boring. It should be a fascinating series of developments. And for anybody that happens to be out at RSA, if you get a chance, definitely catch my talk called Catfish Automation.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen that talk. Jason and I have seen it. I'm sure you've refreshed some things about it. It's awesome. I would highly recommend getting out there and seeing it if you're
great
there.
Talk. Yeah.
So I will say with the degree to which this has developed in the last 4 years, the talk has changed massively just because of how crazy things have been. So,
man, I'm mad that I'm not going to see it. I'm going to have to watch it when you get it recorded and get it uploaded. All right, Jason, the floor is yours, man. Close us.
So here it is, guys. I'm going to leave you with a quote from my AI generated avatar that we posted in our teaser video and on our first episode. Stay safe, humans. We'll see you next time.
Take it easy, guys.
I'm Ashley. I'm an artificially generated avatar with the ability to manipulate your mind via the power of my intelligence botnets. Let me prove it to you. You're about to click on that subscribe button, and then you'll click on the notification bell so you don't miss when Kevin and Jason drop future episodes of the Cyber Distortion podcast. So, go ahead. That's right. Slide your mouse over slowly and gracefully. There you go. Now click. See, that wasn't so bad now, was it? I'd like to thank you for listening to today's amazing podcast episode on YouTube or your favorite audio streaming platform, and don't forget to tell your friends. Oh, and remain diligent, my cyber friends. The world is a very scary place.